Right now, somewhere on this planet, a person worth $400 million is going to wake up angry, not because they lost money, because they don't have enough of it yet. And on that same morning, in a small house a few streets away from you, an 80-year-old woman with less than $40,000 to her name is going to water her plants, drink her coffee, and feel completely, genuinely at peace. Same economy, same country, same species, two totally different relationships with money. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most of us assume we know which one of those people we'd rather be. We'd say the peaceful one, obviously. But if you actually looked at our calendars, our credit card statements, our Instagram activity, the truth is a lot of us are quietly, unconsciously training ourselves to become the angry one. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly why that happens. And more importantly, you're going to have a way to catch yourself doing it before it costs you another 10 years. I've spent a, a long time studying how people actually behave with money, not how they say they behave, not the version they post about, the real version. And once you've looked at enough of it, one pattern shows up again and again. It's not about income. It's not about the stock market. It's a single equation that quietly runs underneath almost every financial decision you make, whether you've ever noticed it or not. So today I want to walk you through that equation, show you exactly where it breaks down for most people, and then give you something practical you can actually use the next time you're standing in front of a big purchase, wondering if it's going to make your life better or just heavier. And I'll be upfront with you, none of what's coming is complicated. There's no secret formula, no 5-step spreadsheet trick that fixes this overnight. If anything, that's exactly why most people miss it. We're conditioned to hunt for complicated answers to our money problems, when the real issue is usually something almost embarrassingly simple that we've just never stopped to actually examine. Here's the equation. Happiness, when it comes to money, is not about how much you have. It's what you have minus what you want. Sit with that for a second, because it explains almost everything else in this video. For decades, researchers argued about whether more money actually makes people happier. Some studies said yes. Some said the effect basically disappears after your basic needs are covered. It took a long time to figure out why the results kept contradicting each other, and the answer turned out to be simple. It depends on who you already are before the money shows up. If you're someone who's already anxious, already dissatisfied, already running on a treadmill of comparison, more income doesn't fix that. It just gives you a bigger treadmill. But if you're someone who already has a baseline of contentment, more money genuinely does add to your life. It's not that money is irrelevant. It's that money amplifies whatever is already there. It doesn't install anything new. That's why you can find a person who inherited millions and is completely miserable, and a retired school teacher on a fixed income who is one of the happiest people you've ever met. The dollar amount was never the deciding variable. The gap between what they have and what they want was. And this is where it gets personal, because that gap isn't fixed. You can close it two ways. You can earn more, which is what almost all of us default to because it's measurable, comparable, and satisfying in a very short-term way. Or you can want less, which almost nobody actively works on because there's no number to track, no chart that goes up and to the right, no way to screenshot your progress. Here's the part that stings a little. Your income is only half the equation, and it's the half you have the least control over in any given year. The other half, what you want, is the half you actually control every single day. And almost nobody trains it on purpose. Think about how strange that actually is. We'll spend years optimizing our income, chasing jobs, learning a new skill, negotiating a raise, completely reasonable things to do. But almost nobody spends even one afternoon deliberately examining what they want and why they want it. We just absorb it passively from whoever happens to be around us, and then treat those wants as fixed facts about ourselves rather than the moving target they actually are. If you never audit that side of the equation, you can double your income every 5 years for the rest of your life and still feel exactly as behind as you do right now, because your wants will have quietly doubled right alongside it. Let me give you a thought experiment. I want you to picture two people. Person one has a net worth north of $200 million, private jet, waterfront estate, a garage most people would build a shrine to. But they're on their third marriage. Their adult kids barely return their call. They haven't had a full night's sleep in years because there's always another deal, another rival, another number they need to beat. Their doctor has given them a list of warnings they've been ignoring for a decade. Person two earns around $70,000 a year, not rich by any headline standard, but they've been married 22 years to someone who still makes them laugh. Their kids call them just to talk, not because they need something. They sleep 8 hours a night without needing anything to knock them out. Their community actually likes having them around. Now, honestly, which one would you rather be? Most people, when they actually slow down and picture the details instead of the number, pick person two without hesitation. And that should tell you something important. On some level, you already know that money was never the main ingredient. You know it right now, listening to this. The problem isn't that you don't understand this. The problem is that your daily behavior doesn't reflect what you just admitted out loud. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. And it's the part that actually matters for your life starting today. Picking person two in a hypothetical doesn't mean you're living like person two right now. Most of us are quietly building the first life while insisting we want the second one. The next few minutes are about closing that gap. And it starts with a question most people have never honestly asked themselves. Here's an exercise I think everyone should run at least once. Imagine you woke up tomorrow on a private island with your closest family, and there was a guarantee, an absolute ironclad guarantee that no other human being would ever see your house, your car, your clothes, or your bank balance again. Nobody. Ever. Now ask yourself, what would you actually choose to buy? Most people, when they picture that scenario honestly, describe something almost embarrassingly modest. A comfortable house with a good view, not a mansion. A reliable truck, not a supercar. Clothes that feel good, not clothes with a logo stitched on the outside. The second you remove the audience, the whole idea of status collapses because status was never about the object. It was about who was supposedly watching you own it. And here's the uncomfortable math behind that. Almost nobody is actually watching. There's an old piece of folk wisdom that goes something like this. In your 20s, you're consumed with what everyone thinks of you. In your 30s, you finally decide you don't care what anyone thinks. And somewhere around your 40s, you realize the truth, which is that almost nobody was thinking about you in the first place. Everyone is too busy running their own version of this exact same equation to spend much time studying yours. And when people do glance at what you own, your car, your kitchen, your watch, behavioral researchers have found something almost funny about what's actually happening in their head. They're rarely admiring you. They're imagining themselves owning it. Your nice car doesn't usually generate respect for you. It generates a brief daydream about them. You're basically paying full price to star as a background prop in someone else's fantasy, and you'll never even get the credit for it. And this problem has gotten dramatically worse in the last decade for one specific reason. For most of human history, your comparison pool was small. You measured yourself against your neighbors, your coworkers, maybe a handful of relatives, a few dozen people tops. Today, you're measuring yourself against a permanent scrolling highlight reel of thousands of strangers, most of whom are showing you the single best 5 seconds of their week, carefully lit, carefully cropped, sometimes not even true. Nobody posts the overdraft fee. Nobody posts the argument in the parking lot before the vacation photo was taken. You're comparing your entire messy average Tuesday against everyone else's curated highlight reel. And that comparison is mathematically impossible to win, no matter how much money you make. It's not an accident that this makes you anxious. That anxiety is, in a very real sense, the business model. The algorithm isn't optimizing for your contentment. It's optimizing for just enough dissatisfaction to keep you scrolling one more minute. Once you actually absorb that, something shifts. The desire for status-driven spending doesn't disappear completely. That instinct is deeply human and probably always will be there in some form, but it does start losing its grip. And that's the whole point. Because once status stops running the show, money finally gets to do the one job it's actually good at, buying you a life you would choose even if nobody else ever saw it. Before we get to the biggest hidden cost of all, I want to point out a smaller one because it sets up everything that's coming next. Every single purchase you make has two prices. There's the number on the receipt, and then there's the second price, the one that never shows up anywhere, but that you end up paying for. As long as you own the thing, a bigger house doesn't just cost a bigger mortgage payment. It costs more time cleaning it, more money heating and cooling rooms you rarely enter, more mental bandwidth remembering which contractor to call when something breaks. A nicer car doesn't just cost the loan payment, it costs the quiet anxiety of parking it somewhere it might get scratched, the insurance bump, the temptation to avoid rough roads that are frankly just roads. None of this shows up on the price sticker. All of it shows up in your actual lived experience of owning the thing for as long as you own it. This is why the smartest money question isn't, can I afford this? It's, what is this actually going to cost me in time, attention, and stress every single month for as long as I keep it? Most financial regret doesn't come from one bad decision. It comes from underestimating that second invisible price tag and then living inside it for years without ever naming what's actually draining you. Now, I want to talk about a kind of debt that will never show up on your credit report, but that quietly bankrupts more people than any loan ever could. I call it social debt, the invisible obligation to keep living up to an image the moment other people find out what you have. There's a well documented case from American history that shows exactly how this works. One of the wealthiest families in the country, generations back, left behind a fortune so large that adjusted for inflation, it would rival some of today's biggest tech fortunes. Within about 3 generations, almost all of it was gone, not because of one bad investment, because an entire family culture formed around the belief that every single relative had to outspend the last one, bigger houses, bigger yachts, more extravagant parties, as a kind of unspoken competition for status inside their own bloodline. Biographers who studied that family found something striking. Nearly every heir who grew up fully inside that system described themselves as deeply unhappy. Money didn't liberate them. It became the strictest employer they ever had, dictating who they could marry, where they were allowed to live, what careers were considered acceptable, even what hobbies were fashionable enough to pursue. On paper, they were among the most financially independent people alive. In practice, almost none of them had any independence at all because the money had quietly taken control of every decision in their life. Now compare that to a very different, far less famous story. A businessman who built a fortune worth billions through a chain of duty-free retail stores and then spent the back half of his life giving nearly all of it away, living in a small rented apartment, flying economy, driving an ordinary car. What made his story remarkable wasn't just the generosity. It's that he tried living like a typical billionaire for a while first. The mansions, the private jet. And he didn't like it. It didn't fit who he was. So he built a completely different life on purpose, one where his spending answered to nobody but himself. People who study his story point to the same conclusion. He was, by most measures, one of the freest wealthy people who ever lived, precisely because he never let his balance sheet write the terms of his life. Two fortunes, two completely opposite outcomes. The difference wasn't the size of the money. It was whether the money was serving them or whether they had quietly started serving it. And I want you to actually sit with this one because it's not just a story about old money families and duty-free tycoons. It's a mirror. Think about the last big purchase you made. Genuinely think about it. Was it something you wanted before anyone else knew about it? Or did some part of the decision get made the moment you imagined someone else seeing it? Be honest with yourself for just a second, because that answer tells you more about your financial future than your salary ever will. So if status isn't the answer, what actually is? I'd argue it's independence. And I mean that far more literally than most people use the word. Independence isn't just not having a boss. It's the ability to wake up and make decisions on your own terms instead of someone else's. And the wild thing is, independence isn't a switch that flips on once you hit some magic number in your bank account. It's a spectrum, and every single dollar you save moves you slightly further along it. Think about it in layers. If you have enough saved that your car breaking down doesn't wreck your month, that's a level of independence. If you have enough saved that losing your job means you can actually take your time finding the right next one instead of grabbing the first offer out of panic, that's a deeper level. If you have enough that you could walk away from a job that's quietly making you miserable, even without a replacement lined up yet, that's independence most people never reach. Not because it's impossible, but because they never frame their savings that way to begin with. Here's the mental shift that changes everything. Stop thinking of savings as money sitting idle. Every dollar you don't spend today isn't wasted. It's a small, specific slice of your future that you now own outright that nobody can take back.